You think the deadliest weapon in a war is a bomb? You're wrong. Sometimes, the most terrifying weapons are built on ghosts. Welcome to the darkest chapter of the Vietnam War. Saigon, 1960. The President Hotel was supposed to be a masterpiece, but the 13th floor was cursed. Workers kept dying in freak accidents. Scaffolds collapsed. People were electrocuted out of nowhere. To break the curse, rumor has it the developer hired a dark shaman and buried 4 virgins alive at the corners of the foundation. Even today, people swear they hear heavy marching boots and screams echoing from that abandoned floor. But the US military looked at that deep-rooted spiritual fear and saw an opportunity. They knew locals believed an unburied body meant the soul wandered in agony forever. So, they weaponized it. In a classified Saigon studio, audio engineers built a custom echo chamber and recorded a masterpiece of pure horror. They called it Ghost Tape Number 10. Just listen to this. They mixed those fake screams with a device called the Laugh Box, a shrill, demonic cackle that pierced the jungle. It was so deeply unsettling that even the American pilots playing the tapes admitted it terrified them. They strapped massive speakers to helicopters and backpacks, blasting this nightmare into the pitch-black jungle at 3 a.m. It was so effective, the military had to ban playing it near their own allied troops, fearing they would go insane and desert. But here is the truly sick part. They didn't just want to scare them, they used it as bait. The sounds forced terrified soldiers to shoot blindly into the dark, and the moment their muzzle flashes gave away their position, helicopters waiting above would rain down absolute hellfire. They created fake wandering souls just to make sure real ones took their place. Psychological warfare is terrifying, but sometimes the jungle itself fights back. In 1968, deep in the demilitarized zone, heavily armed US Marines started reporting something impossible. It wasn't the Viet Cong. It was a creature standing 5 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown hair, walking on 2 legs. Veterans called them rock apes, because these things wouldn't just watch you. They would literally throw rocks at patrols in the dead of night. At first, soldiers thought it was enemy troops trying to bait them, so they threw rocks back. Big mistake. The jungle suddenly came alive. Entire packs of these creatures would emerge from the fog. Absolute panic set in. Platoons would open fire into the darkness, triggering massive, chaotic firefights that lasted for hours. Thousands of rounds of ammunition spent, but when the sun came up, no bodies, no blood trails, nothing. Zoologists claim they were just local macaque monkeys, but macaques don't walk upright or grow to be the size of a grown man. Locals had their own name for them, the Batatut, a legendary forest hominid, like the Yeti of the jungle. To this day, veterans swear on their lives about what they saw out there, unclassified nightmares buried under the canopy. But if the jungle didn't drive you mad, the CIA made sure your own weapons would. In a war of shadows, your deadliest enemy isn't the sniper in the trees. It's the bullet in your own chamber. Meet Project Eldest Son, a top-secret sabotage program run by the CIA and elite SOG units. They didn't just seize ammunition, they re-engineered it, replacing standard powder with lethal high explosives. One single round was enough to turn a reliable rifle into a handheld grenade, waiting to detonate it. Elite teams would sneak into enemy territory under the cover of night, finding secret caches to plant these traitor rounds.
Just a few.
They only needed to swap a few, just enough to sow the seeds of doubt in every single clip. Boom. One trigger pull was all it took to destroy a soldier's trust in his own soul. Thousands of rifles disintegrated. The message was clear. Your weapon is no longer your friend. It is your executioner.
This ammo looks off. Check the casing.
Soldiers began to hesitate. In a firefight, that second of hesitation meant certain death.
Something's wrong here.
The US even dropped leaflets claiming the ammo was just effective. They wanted the enemy to turn on their own suppliers. It was one of the most successful psychological sabotage missions in history. A ghost in the machinery of war. But while bullets were blowing up from the inside, the sky was preparing to drown the enemy from the outside. By 1967, the battlefield changed. The US Air Force moved beyond bombs to something far more elusive. Welcome to the 54th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron. Their mission wasn't to forecast the weather, it was to create it. The code name was Operation Popeye, a top-secret program to weaponize the clouds above the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They used a technique called cloud seeding, dropping chemicals to force moisture into a premature, violent downpour. These crystals acted as the heart of a man-made storm, a technological catalyst for a flood on demand. The results were devastating. The monsoon season was artificially extended by an additional 45 days. Their goal was captured in one simple slogan: make mud, not war. They wanted to drown the enemy's logistics. Supply lines became bottomless pits. The terrain was no longer a path. It was a trap of liquid earth. Landslides triggered by the artificial rain wiped out mountain passes that had survived years of heavy bombing. Strategic bridges collapsed. Supply caches were swept away by flash floods that seemed to come from nowhere. Even the Americans on the ground were left in the dark. Only a few high-ranking officers knew the sky was being manipulated. The operation expanded across borders into Laos and Cambodia. It was the first time geophysical warfare was used on a massive scale. For 5 years, it remained the military's most successful secret, until 1971, when the first whispers reached the public. The leaks sent shockwaves through Washington. The American people learned that their government was playing God with the climate. Senator Claiborne Pell led the charge. He called it a dangerous step toward a future where nature itself is a battlefield. The military tried to deny it, but the evidence was as clear as the mud on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They had opened a Pandora's box. The realization that humans could control the weather led to immediate global
Alert field
panic.
teams, we need evacuations.
In 1977, the UN passed the NMOG Convention, banning the hostile use of environmental modification.
From that position in which it has placed itself. Each member should redouble its efforts to ensure that sanctions are fully enforced. We must all encourage our governments to address themselves to the request of the Mozambique government for assistance to repair the damage resulting from the raids.
The project was officially dead, but the science didn't just disappear, it just went deeper into the shadows. Today, weather modification is used for agriculture, but the line between helping and controlling remains dangerously thin. Are we still weaponizing the sky, or have the signals just become too subtle for us to detect? The echoes of Operation Popeye still haunt the clouds above us, a reminder of powers never meant for human hands. Because once you learn to command the rain, you forget how to listen to the signal. The weather always wins in the end, and the mud never forgets. The rain eventually stopped, the mud dried, but the echoes of these experiments didn't just fade into the jungle. From the ghosts of the 13th floor to the weaponized monsoon, every operation shared the same fatal flaw: hubris. The US military spent millions trying to hack the human soul. They believed technology could replace a deep understanding of a people's heart. They mocked the sacred concepts of hone and via. They turned rituals into cheap tricks and the ghost festival into a bait-and-kill zone. But a people fighting for their homeland cannot be broken by a tape recorder. Truth is a signal that cannot be faked. Decades later, the scars remain. The screams that weren't real and the shadows that moved in the fog still haunt those who survived. War is more than bullets and bombs. It's a battle of frequencies, and some signals were never meant to be decoded. Stay alert. Stay curious. The next signal is already out there. Subscribe to Unknown Signal. Out.